was that signing Te Tiriti would be a way to secure and sustain Te Aupōuri ownership of Te Aupōuri lands. Shortly after signing Te Tiriti, they would come to find out that that wasn't the case. One of the major transactions that really deemed Te Aupōuri landless and had really reduced significantly the percentage of ownership in Te Aupōuri was the Muri Whenua South transaction, which happened in 1863. And that transaction transferred 100,000 acres of Aupōuri land to a small handful of Pākehā settlers. They paid £1,000 for that land, so less than 10 cents an acre. And one of the other things that was really fraught about that transaction was that not all of the owners of that whenua actually agreed. As we all know, a lot of the early Pākehā settlers were quite devious in negotiating and cutting deals with Māori to get their land for cheap, and that's exactly what happened for us in Te Aupōuri. One of the owners of the whenua that did not agree to the transaction going forward, his name was Pou Whakarae, one of the signatories of Te Tiriti on behalf of Te Aupōuri. And at the time the transaction went ahead, one of his kōrero, he expressed a kōrero which we still hold on to today as Te Aupōuri, and that kōrero goes like this: Puritia te whenua, e kore puritia he whetū kamo kamo. So he was saying, hold fast to the land, for one can't hold on to shining stars. And that whakatauaki talks about the importance of holding on to our land, sustaining our ownership and occupation on our land, because at the end of the day, money and all of these other offerings from the settlers, from the Pākehā, will never be able to replace that. So that's a kaupapa that we try to hold onto in our sphere, in our world of Te Aupōuri. But from those years, from the 1860s up until 2012, 2013, when the settlement was completed, there was a huge portion of Te Aupōuri land which remained in either Crown or Pākehā ownership. In the settlement, we got less than 5% back, but over that 160 plus years, we've been afforded whenua that we couldn't access, couldn't utilise and couldn't develop. So a big fight for Te Aupōuri, and mihi ana ki aku kuia kaumātua o Te Aupōuri, nā rātou te tohe, nā rātou te whawhai I kōkiri. I've only come into the settlement journey quite late in the piece for Te Aupōuri. The settlement was completed in 2012, 2013, but the actual negotiations going right back started before I was born in the 1990s, and that 20 plus year journey was progressed by my elders in Te Aupōuri. A lot of them kua mate I tēnei wā, kua riro, but they put in the hard yards then, so then my generation could come in and reap some of the benefits of the settlement and what we got out of the settlement, and that's what I'm doing now. And I remind myself constantly that I wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for them fighting for that 20 plus years. Now we're 10 years post-settlement, still lots of mahi to do, still lots of legacy issues that we're trying to figure out and fix to do with the settlement.
So what was it like as an uri of Te Aupōuri to be in the thick of that redress process?
Yeah, so a lot of the mahi was done by the kuia kaumātua of Te Aupōuri, he tamariki rawa noa hau I tērā wā. So I was just a kid and the process had started before I was even born. But from the kōrero that's been given to me and the history that I've read, it wasn't an easy process. The settlement actually started way back in the time of Maturata. Nāna te kaupapa I whakaaro ake. And that was through the actually Te Rūnanga nui o te hiku o te ika. So that at the very beginning of the settlement it was set up to be a collective te hiku settlement between ngā iwi e rima o te hiku, being Ngāti Kuri, Te Aupōuri, Ngai Takoto, Te Rarawa and Ngāti Kahu. Over the years of negotiations, there wasn't only disagreements between ngā iwi and the Crown, but there was disagreements between the iwi themselves. So one by one, each respective iwi decided to split away from the collective and progress their settlements individually or in their own iwi capacity. In the end, 4 of the 5 iwi settled, Te Rarawa, Te Aupōuri, Ngāti Kuri and Ngai Takoto. Our whanaunga Ngāti Kahu completed a partial deed of settlement and they still continue to progress their direct negotiations with the Crown in regard to their settlement. So it was a hard time when I talked to a lot of my kuia kaumātua that are still around, the likes of Waitai Petera, ka puta te tangi, ka heke ngā roimata. So it was a hard time, and it's hard for our kuia kaumātua to think back to those times, because not only was there feuds between the Crown and themselves, but there were feuds between ngā iwi o te hika, ngā iwi o te hiku o te ika, whanaunga ki te whanaunga, iwi ki te iwi. So that made things even harder, and it scarred a lot of our kuia kaumātua, that redress negotiation process.
So how were whānau whakaaro and voices brought into that process?
He iwi hui tātou, he iwi kōrero tātou, he iwi wānanga tātou. For Te Aupōuri, this was back in the day where there was no Zoom, there was no Microsoft Teams, and you would call a hui at the marae and people would show up and share their perspectives and their whakaaro. Things are a bit different these days in terms of iwi members feeling connected to their marae, being able to practically return to their marae and participate in these hui. I think it's a lot harder now than it was then.
Why is that?
I think just there's been multiple generations of urbanisation, and with each generation, if there's not a deliberate and active nurturing and strengthening of your connection to home, if you do live in an urban setting, it makes it harder for you to return and feel like you have a voice to participate in whatever kaupapa is happening. Despite the technological advancements, I mean, we have Zooms, we have Teams, but the beauty of it in those days was that, there were limited opportunities to express your whakaaro, being these physical hui at the marae, but the beauty in that is that everyone shares their whakaaro in the one space and in the one whare, and it's clear to see what everyone is thinking and what everyone
Did you feel
is
that
supporting.
Motivated whānau to actually become more involved because they knew that their opportunities to do so were not limited, but I guess, when it was on kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, because Te Aupōuri is a very urbanised iwi, and it was even back in those days. But I know that the likes of Te Aupōuri ki Tāmaki and other urban groupings of Te Aupōuri, they were very active in banding together and attending the hui and collating feedback from their respective groupings to share to the Rūnanga of the time. Also, the splitting up of the Te Hiku Rūnanga, the Muri Whenua Rūnanga, into its 5 iwi. The drive to split it up was to include more whānau voices, because some of the iwi representatives felt that when it was collectivised, there were a lot of executive decisions being made at the top, which didn't necessarily include all of the voices of all of the iwi and all of the hapū, which is especially important for us in Whangaroa, because we're a very hapū mana motuhake, hapū rangatiratanga, hapū driven collective. So that's an important thing to consider in these negotiations. But we also have to be realistic and pragmatic. If we split it up too much, it makes the process extremely difficult, and it also makes it harder on those that are trying to progress the settlement on behalf of everyone else to try and move forward, because they're basically paralysed by having to consult with every whare, every whānau, every household. So I think we need to find a balance. Including whānau voices is very important, but we need to draw the line somewhere. Yeah, I think for Whangaroa, the consultation and the wānanga and the kōrero should happen on a marae basis. I think if you split it up into a hapū basis, there's too many collectives to have to talk to, and a lot of these hapū, to my limited knowledge, are not active, and there are a lot of there are handfuls and collectives of hapū that'll whakapapa to one marae. Hapū mana and hapū ingoa are important, but I think practically the physical bounds of these collectives that we need to have the kōrero with and have the wānanga with should happen on a marae basis. In saying that, we also need to make sure that our marae are resourced and are actually fit to facilitate these kōrero. Myself, for example, Te Tahaawai hasn't been an active marae for some time now, and it's going to be a while until we can rebuild and actually use that space. So for a hapū like Te Tahaawai in that position, well, what's our marae in the meantime to be able to provide a space for us to meet? Online is there, but I think you can never replace physical hui, face-to-face kōrero, hei kona rongo ai koe i te ihi, te wehi, te mana o te tangata.
Yeah, kia ora.
I see hapū and marae as synonymous anyway. You have one marae that might have multiple hapū, but if your marae has 5 hapū, I don't think you need to have 5 or 10 kai kōrero, I think one marae, 2 kai kōrero would suffice. Just keeping in mind that the more numbers you have at a decision-making governing body, the harder it is to actually make decisions. So, and at the end of the day, that's what a negotiation is. You need to be able to make a decision and live with it at some point.
So what were some of the first tangible outcomes for whānau that were achieved, both positive and challenging, once that redress process had been completed?
The most tangible and impactful outcome of settlement is land back. And that's all settlement is.